The Marvel Cinematic Universe needs Doctor Doom. And here's the reason why. And yes, I know my hairline's crooked. It's been crooked since I was like 7. I don't care. So here's the thing. The Marvel Cinematic Universe villains, and this is a point that we will reiterate over the course of these videos, right? Because I feel like it just cannot be said enough. The Marvel Cinematic Universe villains are formulaic, right? You can set your watch to an MCU villain. They're very, very, very two-dimensional. If you look at Thanos objectively, right? Remove the whole idea of like the lines and the really, really cool fight scenes and the moments. Look at Thanos objectively. What is Thanos? Thanos is a guy whose world basically died because of overpopulation and there not being enough resources. And so for reasons that really only ever makes sense to himself, he decided that half the universe needed to be blinked out of existence because there's too many people and not enough resources. How he knows that, I don't really know. I have a hard time believing Thanos traveled to every single planet and studied every single planet's geopolitical landscape across the entire universe and came to that conclusion. Maybe he did, right? Whatever the case happens to be, Thanos was two-dimensional in that way. It's a very, very boring and very, very basic motivation for a villain who in the comics is far more dynamic and usually way more interesting. But even as intriguing as Thanos is in the comics, Doctor Doom's just that much better. Doctor Doom is a very dynamic and very intriguing and very motivating and sometimes hilarious villain. He's one of these guys where he could bring a element to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that it simply just lacks. And that's creating a villain that not only is doing villainous things, but that you actually kind of find yourself rooting for, right? Because when it comes to Doctor Doom, I mean, it's just he's great in almost every way. Okay, so let's use examples here to give you guys a well-rounded depiction of Doctor Doom, right? To give you guys an understanding of who he is as a villain. And then we'll talk about how this could benefit the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So let's talk about his cockiness, right? Doctor Doom is arrogant, just extremely arrogant. Like, you guys think Loki is arrogant? No. Doctor Doom is on a whole different level of arrogance. One, he only ever refers to himself in the third person. Doctor Doom does not refer to himself as I or me or anything like that. So imagine if, like, over the course of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Loki always referred to himself in the third person, and that's basically Doom, right? Like, it's crazy. So another really good example of his arrogance is during Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, right? It's one of the best the best comic book story ever written. But there's a point where basically Namor the Submariner goes to visit Doctor Doom. And the reason why is, of course, the multiverse is collapsing, Earths are crashing into each other, which destroys their respective universes. And so when the Illuminati initially learned about it, Namor the Submariner and Reed Richards and Iron Man and Doctor Strange and all those guys basically came together. And because the Infinity Gauntlet worked, but was destroyed at the same time, there was no discernible means to stop an incursion unless they were to obliterate the other Earth. The Illuminati didn't want to do that. They were not okay with wiping out an entire planet to save their own. And Namor the Submariner was. And so he ultimately defected and then joined Thanos and his Cull Obsidian, right? So like Corvus Glaive and Supergiant and Proxima Midnight and all those guys. The problem was Namor didn't know what he was getting into. And Thanos and his guys, it wasn't simply enough to destroy that world to basically prevent the destruction of the main Marvel universe. They would actually relish it. They became bloodlusted, right? They would kill all the superheroes on that world. And so Namor, realizing just how badly he screwed up, realized Thanos and those guys had to be stopped. So then he goes to see Doctor Doom. There's this amazing exchange that takes place between the two of them, right? Just this amazing exchange where Doctor Doom is talking about the people of Latveria, right? The people that he basically rules over as their dictator / benevolent leader, if there is such a thing. And what he says to Namor is he says, do you really believe that if these people wanted to kill me or oust me as their leader, that they couldn't do it? They could. Anytime they wanted to. They could kill me, they could destroy me, they could push me out, right? They could force me out of Latveria because I would rather leave than see harm come to them. He says, but I keep them protected. I keep them watered. I keep them fed. I keep them safe. So before they pray to whatever God they pray to when they go to sleep, they give thanks to me. It's like the most arrogant shit ever, right? So then like Namor finally asks him, like, are you going to help me destroy Thanos and the Cull Obsidian? And Dr. Doom's like, no, I'm not going to. He's like, it's bad enough you threw in your lot with like Reed Richards and all those guys because Dr. Doom hates Reed. He was like, but then after that went south, you went to ally yourself with Thanos, with a mad titan, and then you come to me when that goes wrong, right? You bring the stinking carcass of your failure to my front door. He was like, you should know by now, Namor, Dr. Doom is no one's second choice. Literally, he refused to help Namor the Submariner for no other reason than the fact that Namor didn't come to him first, right? It's petty. It's like the most petty thing ever, but it's hilarious, right? It's hilarious in that way, right? Imagine that kind of scenario being transferred to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, the other part of this, and this is where like the villainous aspect of Dr. Doom really comes into play, his quest for power is insatiable. It can never be quelled, right? He can never have enough power for any number of reasons. Way back in the day, it was due to the fact that his mother's soul was taken by Mephisto when she had made a deal with Mephisto in order to basically learn witchcraft. In the story Triumph and Torment, Doctor Strange and Dr. Doom freed his mother's soul, so she was basically allowed to go to heaven. Ever since then, the whole acquisition of just huge amounts of power has largely just been Dr. Doom being a dick. That's really all it is, right? Just him just being a bad guy. But it's still cool, right? It's one of those cool things. This was solidified in Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four when you had what was called the Council of Reeds. Basically this coming together of all these different iterations of Reed Richards from across the multiverse, pretty much all of whom had abandoned their own families for the quest of solving the problem of everything, right? Fixing all these different multiversal problems. And so what this did is it led to this realization that in multiple universes, not every universe, but in multiple universes, Dr. Doom will rise to power and then he'll basically try to just consolidate as much power as he possibly can. Whenever this happens in an alternate reality, they would basically kidnap that version of Dr. Doom, then they would lobotomize him and they would stick him in a basement below the Citadel where the council resided. Like literally there were just dozens of these Dr. Dooms and they just sat down there, I am Doom, I am Doom. That's all they did. But it solidified that Dr. Doom's quest for power can never ever be satiated. And it makes sense because in the comics, Dr. Doom has had the power cosmic. So basically he's had the power of Galactus. He had the power of the Beyonder, and the Beyonder himself was more powerful than God at his peak. He's had cosmic cubes. He's had the Infinity Gauntlet. He's had all these things over the course of his entire existence. And yet it's still never enough power. Now, sit that on the back burner for a second because we'll talk about that and we'll come back to that here in a little bit. But the other part of this and what really makes Dr. Doom so dynamic is that for all the pomp and circumstance and all the arrogance and all the hubris and all that kind of stuff, he's kind of a softie at his core to a degree. He respects intelligence. As much as he hates Reed Richards, he respects him because of how intelligent he is. And in fact, he even respects Valeria Richards, the daughter of Reed, who arguably is as smart, if not smarter, than both Reed and Victor Von Doom. Marvel kind of toys with it, and a lot of the times they say she's more intelligent than they are because she's more imaginative because she's a child, whereas they're adults, so their imagination has largely been removed from the equation. They stick more to like logic and reason, different things along those lines, but he respects intelligence. When it comes to the people of Latveria, he's very similar to Black Panther, right? Black Panther would burn the world before he ever allowed anything to happen to the people in Wakanda. Like literally, he would seize control of the world's nuclear arsenal and just wipe out the rest of the world in a nuclear holocaust if he had to choose between them or Wakanda. That's just the way that it is. Dr. Doom's the exact same way. Woe betide the poor soul who goes into Latveria and starts causing problems, especially if Dr. Doom's around there to see it, because he will end them with a quickness. There's no arguing that point, right? There's no debating that. Dr. Doom cares just profusely about his people, right? He treats them like they're his children, right? He cares about them in the same way that a parent loves a child. He would never let any harm come to the Latvians, no matter the circumstance. In that caring nature, it provides the human dynamic. So you take all those things and you roll them all up together and then you throw them in the MCU, and what you get is a villain unlike any that you've seen before in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You get a guy who is wildly complex. You realize he's a bad guy, you realize he does bad things, but you realize that it's also because it's just the nature of his inner torment. It's the nature of him, the things he's gone through, the things he's struggled with, that just, kind of give him that motivation and desire that he has. His quest for power, if they choose to keep this intact, is all for the purpose of being able to basically defeat Mephisto and get his mother's soul back. If they end up deciding to go to the latter of Dr. Doom just basically being a dick, I'm okay with that too. That's perfectly fine, right? But But this guy could be a villain and he could be a hero. He can bounce back and forth between the two. It's one of those things, like, I mean, like for all the villainous things he did and where he seemed like he was a straight up bad guy, and Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, he was the first one to figure out what was happening with the incursions, right? And well, really, he was also the one who caused it, but that's beside the point. The important thing here is that he figured out what was going on. He was doing everything he could to save the multiverse, while at the same time, not really sharing any of his information with anybody else. He's hugely and immensely intelligent, right? Just wildly capable. You add that just dynamic, right? That the nature of a villain like that, who is hugely intelligent, way beyond what Tony Stark is. I mean, way beyond what Tony Stark is. The funny thing is that if Tony Stark had like gone to Doctor Doom in like Avengers Endgame and was like, Victor Von Doom, like, I have discovered time travel, the first thing Doom would do is analyze his research. The second thing he would do is he would say, this is sloppy. That's exactly what Doctor Doom would do, right? He would just be like, this is sloppy, Stark. I expected better of a man of your talent, right? And then he would clean up Tony Stark's work and then he would give it back to him. That's what Doctor Doom would have done, right? That's just how capable this guy is. Either that or he would have stolen it, because Doctor Doom has a means of time travel. He's got a time platform. So like, he had the ability to travel back and forth through time. Guy can do virtually anything. The stuff that Tony Stark figures out, Doctor Doom's known for a long time and just simply hasn't implemented it because he doesn't want to, or because for whatever reason it wouldn't benefit him in some way. But whatever the case is, you take him and you throw him into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you've basically got a person who is light years ahead of Tony Stark in terms of intelligence, and is seemingly light years ahead of anybody else in terms of their ability to navigate a situation, to understand how to cope with huge levels of power. I mean, he's in a league on his own, right? He's in his very own league. Now, having said that, can you make Doctor Doom work by himself? And that's where things get a little hairy. If we were talking about the storyline, The Books of Doom, which is the most comprehensive origin of Doctor Doom, which I won't spoil the ending in case you guys decide to go read it, sure, right? You could do a Doctor Doom solo film in the vein of The Books of Doom, right? One of the best Doctor Doom stories ever written. If what we're doing is throwing Doctor Doom into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he does best when you're bouncing him off of other people. Doctor Doom is the most entertaining when he's interacting with other people. Otherwise, it's just him sitting in his castle just being a dick to his Doombots, right? And talking down to the people around him. When you have him in the presence of Reed Richards, and it's the bickering back and forth between him and Reed, or if he's analyzing the research of somebody out there or something along those lines, those kinds of things make him cool. When you have a story like Doom War, where Doctor Doom invades Wakanda and then takes all of its vibranium because the Panther God Bast lets him, and then uses it to make himself God, and the only thing that can be done to stop Doctor Doom is to basically take all the vibranium and render it in earth, right? To turn it into just useless pieces of rock. That stuff is cool, right? That's the thing. Those are the kind of things that make him interesting. Bouncing off people, interacting with people. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, right? Do we need Doctor Doom in the MCU? Would you want to see a character that complex? Would a character that complex work? Or would they have to scale him down to a more two-dimensional mold in order to give him, or at least introduce him in a way that people could understand? Because if I'm being honest, I want a more dynamic, three-dimensional Doctor Doom that can stand the test of time of the MCU, who in some movies would help the Earth superheroes, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the Eternals, and in other stories would actively work against them. That's the kind of Doctor Doom that I want to see. And then sometimes he would just sit there and just judge them, right? And just be like, you guys are all incompetent, and leave. That's something Doctor Doom would do, right? That's literally something Doctor Doom would do. Okay, imagine this, right? You've got whoever the new Black Panther is, right? And then you've got like the new Avengers, and you've got like the Eternals, and let's, just for good measure, let's say the X-Men are there, right? So let's say it's the MCU 10 years from now, and like there's some massive threat or something like that, right? Like Annihilus and the Annihilation Wave are coming from the negative zone, and it's gonna be like in the comics where they're like a plague sweeping across the universe, and everything falls in their path. And they're all kind of sitting around and they're talking about what it is that we should do, right? Doctor Doom, like literally, Doctor Doom would just blow the door off. Right, like he would just blow the door. He wouldn't even knock. He would just boom, just blow the door off. They're like, "What's your problem, man?" He's like, "This is how Doctor Doom enters a room." Right? It's like he would just walk in, right, and they would be like, "Okay, Doctor Doom, like, what are your thoughts on all this?" And he would just be like, "Why would I waste my time with you? You're all incompetent," and then leave. So he would literally just show up there to tell them they're incompetent and leave. It would be hilarious. It'd be absolutely amazing. But in reality, what you would know is he's basically 10 steps ahead of them, right? He's already got the problem solved. They just haven't figured it out yet. And because he's Dr. Doom and he's just a dick, he's not going to tell them, right? So it's one of those things, right? So let me know if that's the kind of character you would want to see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what other villains you want us to make videos on about who we should see in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because right now, I mean, between like Dr. Doom and Annihilus, it's largely been based on like the personality types of these characters. But we could pick people like the Marquis of Death, or like we could even just go with like the Molecule Man if he was just a straight up villain, or like the Beyonder. We could go with any number of those people, right? Who are just ridiculously OP, and how none of the Earth superheroes would stand a chance because they're just so broken. Let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you all later. Peace.